So let's start with sexual reproduction. How do you define sexual reproduction? Sexual. What's that?
Two hosts.
Okay, you have two hosts, right? You have a male and a female. Okay, and what else is necessary?
Genetically unique.
Okay, so we'll put that in the result here, but you have genetically unique offspring. Okay, but what else do you need for sexual reproduction? Yes. Yes, okay, so you have the fusion of gametes. Okay, and then these gametes, what is their ploidy? You know what that is? All right, so they are haploid. They are one in, they have half of a full set of chromosomes, and when they fuse together, they create two copies and a diploid organism. Okay. All right, so then how do we define asexual reproduction? Yeah, no gametes. What'd you say? One of what? I can't hear you. Okay, you're right. You only need one host. How about that? Yeah, you don't need two. You can just, well, you can't, but the organism can do it by itself. All right. And then, sorry, what did you say again? Okay. Right, it's kind of the same thing, yeah. One individual is necessary. Do you have a fusion of gametes? No. What do you have instead? Yeah, so the splitting of cells. I mean, that's pretty much all, that's it, right? And those cells, it may go through mitosis, but mitosis is not the only process. What was the other process that we had in bacteria?
Binary fission.
Right, binary fission is another process. It's not similar to mitosis, but not the same. Okay. All right, so what's the result of asexual reproduction? Okay, good. Identical. Except for mutations. Okay, good. All right, now talk to your neighbor and what are the advantages of each? Okay, and also then you can, with that, describe what environmental conditions. Okay. All right, let's start with sexual reproduction. What's the advantages of sexual reproduction? Love. Okay, good. Yeah.
Because the offspring are all unique, if one is to get a disease, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll all get it, so survival rate is higher.
Okay, good. So you have variation. Okay, in the offspring. What else? That's the main one.
It makes it good for variable environments.
Okay, good. So if you move down to the environmental conditions, if you have a variable environment where conditions are changing, and selection pressure is high, then it's good to have a variety of different types of, or a variation in the offspring. All right, what's the advantages of asexual reproduction? Yeah, here, you can be single. Come on. Yeah. Catriona. Yeah.
If there's no other individuals, then you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, yeah, so let's say it's simpler, less complicated, right? Ian, did you have something?
I was gonna say the same thing.
Okay.
It's all about that energy.
What's that?
It's all about that energy.
Okay, it does. It requires less energy. All right, and this one, the advantage of sexual reproduction was variation. So the advantage of asexual reproduction is there's no variation, right? So what environmental conditions are best for asexual reproduction? All right, so if you have a stable environment and the parent is fit for that environment, there's no point in varying things. Let's just keep the same genetic makeup and the offspring will be fit for that environment, all right? The disadvantages are pretty much, well, if you're in a variable environment and all the genes are the same, then they're all susceptible to that same variation, okay? So it's not good for a variable environment. And likewise, sexual reproduction, if it's a very stable environment, most of the variation that you created by producing those offspring, not all of them will be fit for the environment. So many of them won't survive. Okay, good. All right, so let's move, or any questions on that? Okay, let's move and talk about these different types of reproduction. So there were a couple open-ended questions in the video lecture, and we'll go over those. And again, going back to our definition, decide whether they are asexual or sexual. Okay? All right, so self-fertilization. So this is where one individual produces both gametes. I'm going to zoom in. And so they can produce a sperm and an egg, and then, so they are hermaphrodite, and then that individual can fertilize itself. So is this sexual or asexual reproduction? Okay. Who says sexual? Guys, anyone say asexual? Okay, why do you say asexual?
Because it's one individual producing two identical copies.
Okay, right. So it is one individual, but actually because those gametes went through meiosis, it's still going to be a unique individual. Okay? But yeah, that is the asexual characteristic. That is the same. It does only take one individual. But because you have the fusion of gametes, it's going to be a sexual reproduction.
I seem to remember in the video lecture you saying something that sounded like this, but it was asexual. Did I just hear that wrong, or is there something really similar to this that is asexual?
Yes, so we can go, apomixis, okay, is producing seeds without fertilization. Doesn't require gametes, so it is asexual. Okay, so an example of that is dandelions do this, and lots of other plants as well. An example of self-fertilization.
Be self-pollination?
Yeah, self-pollinating plants. They are monoecious. Okay. All right. Test tube cloning. Who remember what that is? Without. Thank you. All right.
You cut up the plant and then also different pieces of the plant grow and like a culture.
Right.
And you plant them.
So this requires a culture, some sort of medium with nutrients in it, and then you can just cut little pieces of the plant and they will grow within the medium.
Yeah, or like. Huh. So it's almost the same as like cutting up a starfish, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Except you're using a nutrient medium.
Yeah.
Yeah. But same principle, yeah. So this is sexual or asexual? Asexual. Okay, and so you can do this with specific plants that will grow in a medium. All right, hermaphroditism. Okay, this is actually very similar to self-fertilization, right? Where you have one individual with both gonads, so it can produce both sperm and egg. There were two different types of hermaphroditism. Or where you could change from one to the other. What was that one called? Nemo, yeah? What's that? Sequential, good. So there's sequential hermaphroditism where you start as one and then change to the other. Or you could be simultaneous, so you could have both of them at the same time. Okay, either way, so if you're simultaneous hermaphrodite, you can both exchange sperm and egg, or you would both exchange sperm. In sequential, though, you wouldn't. Yes?
What's that last word?
Gonads? Not gohads. All right, sexual or asexual? Sexual, right? Okay, so earthworms do this.
Emos do this.
What's that?
Emos do too.
Emus?
No, emos.
Nemo, yes. Clownfish. Okay, yeah, this is a long list of stuff. Okay, fission. Fission is just where you have one cell. Dividing into two cells. Okay, or it can be the full organism. So one, adult dividing to two adults. Okay, so we talked about binary fission. That's what occurs in bacteria. Is this sexual or asexual? Asexual. So we have bacteria, which would be one cell dividing into two. Sea anemones. Anemones, okay. Will just divide. One of them will start to divide into two. Okay, but same sort of process, just on a different scale. Okay, fragmentation. Okay, this is where you can take pieces of.
Sorry, Dr. Kurt.
Yeah.
See what it says right by the station. It says one cell dividing into two, one adult dividing.
Yeah.
So can you explain that one more time?
Okay, so in bacteria, you would have a cell dividing into two individuals. In a sea anemone, you have a full adult. It can also just split its full structure into two mature adults. Yeah.
So in like a sea anemone, is that like a chemical process that happens within the sea anemone that triggers that asexual reproduction? How does
So yeah, it usually has to do with space availability. So if it goes on a rock, it's all by itself, and there's lots of other space around it where it could inhabit it, it'll just divide.
Okay, but like inside the sea anemone, when that triggers, is it like a chemical? Is it a hormone that causes that?
I'm not sure on the specifics, but yeah, it's going to be a really complicated process because it is a full organism with lots of different parts. But yeah, I'm not sure. And I'm sure it varies depending on the organism as well. Okay, so fragmentation is where one individual can be split into many different pieces, and each of those pieces can become a new organism. Okay, so this is asexual. Sea stars, great example of this, where you can cut off one of the legs, so you can cut off all 5 legs, and each of those legs will produce a new sea star.
So did you say aspen trees are also fragmentation?
Aspen trees, yeah. Well, no, because they don't actually separate.
They don't actually.
They're actually all the same organism, yeah.
In the video lecture, did you say that lizards are an example of fragmentation? That when a lizard like loses maybe a limb or a tail and then it grows?
No, because the limb doesn't grow a new lizard. But if that happened, then it would work. So they can regrow their limbs, but yeah, whereas a sea star, you cut off the limb, and that grows into a whole new sea star. All right, parthenogenesis. This one's really interesting. Actually, let's do that one last. All right, pollination. We kind of talked about that with self-fertilization. But here you have, which occurs in plants. Oops, that's really bad. Where the sperm is carried in pollen, and that fertilizes the egg in the flower. It's really just a specialized form of sexual reproduction. In a group called angiosperm, so flowering plants. And gymnosperms actually do as well. Yes?
So does that mean there are plants that only produce the pollen and only produce the eggs, or do they produce both?
So it depends, yeah. So self-fertilization would be monoecious plants where they produce both. So one flower has both pollen and egg in the same flower. Or if they're dioecious, one plant will produce pollen, the other plant will produce flowers that only produce the egg. Okay, this isn't the complete list. There's still a few things on here from your video lecture that you can add to this if you want. But we'll leave it at this. We'll go through parthenogenesis too. All right, yeah.
Well, the ones that aren't on here, will they like show up on the test?
They could. I don't know. I haven't written it yet. No. But this is a good representative. I mean, there's only a few other ones. I just ran out of room, so I didn't put them all in there.
So in this video lecture, it was talking about how plants had it set up, so like when the bees were like the pollination, when the bees went down, like they would either go down so far or like all the way down. How did, like, what was the difference between how far down they went and how?
So what they're trying to do is they're trying to either eat the pollen or the nectar. So wherever that nectar is, that's how far down they will go. So if you have a longer tube or a shorter tube, and it's not so much how far down they go, it's actually the placement of the stamens which have the pollen on them. So they can be at different places, which will prevent then it from fertilizing itself. It'll carry it somewhere else, another flower, and fertilize that instead. Yes?
I thought flowers had some kind of mechanism so that the pollen from itself wouldn't be able to fertilize itself.
Yes, so some of them can. So not all flowers are created the same, or some of them have chemical recognition. They can recognize their own and reject it. But some of them don't. Some of them you can. All right. So parthenogenesis. All right, what was parthenogenesis?
Like those lizards, they didn't need the other lizard except for to get like the hormones and stuff.
Right. So with the lizards, an egg was still laid, right? And from that egg developed a new lizard. But was there fertilization taking place? No. Yeah. So was this sexual or asexual? Asexual. Yeah. And depending on the parthenogenesis, not all parthenogenesis is the same. Sometimes it results in just a clone of the parent and offspring. Sometimes whatever genes are there can be doubled, so it would be slightly different. But for the most part, you're going to have the same genes. And this occurs in lots of insects and invertebrates, but not so much invertebrates. Some vertebrates do, but not a lot. Yes?
So if the mother's DNA is cloned, then does that mean that all offspring of parthenogenesis are female?
Yes. Yeah, so that species of lizard that was highlighted in the video lecture, that they're all female. There's no males in that whole species.
So like, what would a chicken be? Because a chicken can lay an egg, but the
Mhm.
male has to go on and fertilize it.
Right, so they can't do parthenogenesis, so that would just be regular sexual reproduction. Yes?
What about the reptiles that like they are fertilized, but then it determines like the gender based on the temperature that they're stored at?
Right. So that's just more sexual reproduction variations in that. But yeah. So Jurassic Park, right? Anyone watch Jurassic Park 1? Okay. So part of that story was they were able to reproduce through parthenogenesis. Like they created them all to be females, which was not smart. If you didn't want them to do parthenogenesis, you should have created them all males. Right? And then Jurassic Park never would happen. It keeps happening over and over again. They're supposed to be doing.
It's like Hollywood doesn't get it or something.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So let's see. How much time do we have? Lots of time. All right. Life cycles. Do you remember this from 201? Okay. With you and your buddy, I want you to see if you can remember the human life cycle. You draw it out.
There we go. Conservative. So, she can work hands to this. Yeah.
Is that from last year? Nice.
You know, I still use this symbol all the time. I can't remember to say yeah, I know, but like,
Oh, yeah.
it's really hard.
It's an ooh second. It's a big O. It's an
Juvenile delinquent.
Okay, does yours look like that?
You forgot meiosis. Oh, there you go. I see it now. It's not.
Got it. I got it now.
You got it now.
I did forget the temple. Okay, so we'll be doing a lot of life cycles in this half of biology. When we get to plants, we'll look at different groups of plants and their life cycles. And then again with some animals. So reproduction is an important part of the life cycle, and when you refer to an organism's life history, generally you're talking about its reproduction, when it reproduces, how many times, what it does with its young, and so on. So, all right, that's human life cycle. It's pretty simple. What if you were to draw a life cycle of, let's say, a sea star? Okay, what would be different? Okay? Except, what'd you say? Oh, yeah. Maybe not. Well, okay, that's part of it, but sea stars also produce sperm and egg. They can do fragmentation and regeneration. So you're going to have a more complicated life cycle. So let's draw a sea star in the middle here. And another one over here. I'm using very stereotypical sexist colors. Hey, no, let's switch it up. Yeah. All right, this is a female. She likes blue. Who cares? This is a boy who likes pink. Okay? All right, from there, here, I'll give you a little bit of direction. So on the left side, I want you to write an asexual life cycle. And then on the right, I want you to write draw a sexual life cycle. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to think about that and work it out. So sexually, it's going to be very similar to the human life cycle. Asexual, though, that'd be a little bit different, right? It can do both. It won't do both at the same time, but it can do both. All right, so yeah, I'll give you a few minutes. You can work with your buddy and see if you can come up with the more complicated life cycle. Okay,